Welcome to the Whole Story podcast. This podcast series is focused on inspiring sustainability in agriculture, using the framework of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. Each week, our guests are invited to share their story, highlight a particular one of the 17 goals, and leave us with some practical tips for sustainability on farms. I'm Beck Smith, founder of The Whole Story, a B Corp certified social enterprise inspiring, facilitating, and articulating holistic sustainability in agriculture. And this podcast has been brought to life in partnership with the incredible team at FMG, who are passionate about partnering with organisations like The Whole Story, so together we can support rural New Zealand. So whatever you're doing while listening to this episode, thanks for choosing us. The best way you can support our mahi is to follow and share the show on whatever app you're listening on, and I hope this episode leaves you inspired and excited about the bigger picture of sustainability in agriculture. Today on the Whole Story podcast, I catch up with Andrew Morrison, Chairman of Beef+Lamb New Zealand. Andrew is a true blue Southland sheep and beef farmer, passionate about rural communities and the contribution these communities make through the agricultural sector to New Zealand's economy. This week's episode is based around the UN Sustainable Development Goal 16, Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions. And Andrew is going to reflect on the role Beef+Lamb New Zealand plays in this space and his own personal views on the goal. Andrew displays strong leadership for our sector. He places focus on the people working within it, navigating complex, fast-paced challenges, and mentoring the next generation of leaders coming through. At the end of the day, though, he is a farmer first and can be found driving posts and planting trees to connect with tangible sustainability outcomes on the land. So welcome along, Andrew.
Thanks, Bex. Look, I really appreciate having the opportunity to have a chat.
Let's kick into it then, and I bet our listeners are dying to hear the story of Andrew Morrison.
Well, Andrew Morrison's a pretty boring guy, actually. Andrew Morrison is a Southland sheep and beef farmer who lives in the district that he was raised in, and he actually loves there. 58 years old, farm with my wife, Lisa. I'm a product of the 1980s, the economic reform there, where, life was pretty tough for the farming community through the 80s. My mum and dad were farming through there, and I remember vividly sitting in on meetings with banks as a young man, not knowing whether you were going to get to play the game for another year or not. And I remember my guidance counsellors at school saying, well, there's no real future in farming. Why don't you go be an accountant or, pretty good communication skills. Why don't you go be a journalist? And didn't really want to do any of that. So didn't listen to the guidance counsellors, went to Lincoln University, did a commerce degree. I'm number two son, so number one son is on the farm, and I never thought I'd get an opportunity to go farming. Once I finished university, went and worked in the mines in Australia for a period of time. We're travelling around the States, and I had quite a bad car accident over there, so I ended up coming home back to New Zealand and recuperating, and actually ran into my future wife while I was home. She's Canadian. She was actually working on my mum and dad's farm while I was recuperating from this accident. We didn't go out or form any relationships then, but then as soon as I got better, I went back up and I was working in Canada for 2 years, and we ran into each other up there and decided we did enjoy each other's company. I convinced her to come back to New Zealand one Christmas. We had return tickets to Canada. We weren't going to stay in New Zealand, but we had a close family friend who was going through cancer at the time. And they rang up and asked if I could manage the farm, and I probably said no, because I had a return ticket to Canada and they kept bothering me, and ended up staying and absolutely loved getting back into farming. By the same token, always thought I'd be managing or working on farms. I managed to convince my parents to go into partnership, and over the years we farmed in partnership with my brother and my mum and dad, and we separated out in 2013, and Lisa and I are farming 11,000 stock units now. And it's been a fantastic journey. I love farming, love rural communities, so the ability to get back into it's been great.
That's awesome. And what really resonates with me there is actually just how you've taken on opportunities as they've presented themselves. Like the ones that really are meant to be, keep knocking, and that you've taken those on board and run with them and look at where they've led you.
Yeah, and there's a recurring thing of saying no. So when, I got asked to manage the farm, I said no. Then truck forward to about 2011, balance election to be a director, got rung up to ask to put my name forward, and I said no, because we were going through quite a difficult succession plan at the time. But the guy convinced me to put my name forward, and yeah, it was the best thing I've ever done. And I think the lesson I learned out of that is if a door opens, walk through it and see where it takes you. So yeah, it was a good lesson to learn.
Yeah, and that leads quite nicely into my next question, which is around sustainability for me, because that was something that I didn't keep saying no to, but I kept kind of pushing to the side. And eventually it's kind of come around full circle now, and I've definitely leaned into it and walked through that door. But it's such a big word, sustainability. What does it mean to you, Andrew?
Yeah, look, I took the opportunity to listen to some of your previous podcasts with Captain Anderson and Julia Jones and Kerry and the likes. Everyone has a different view on things, but, the core of sustainability in my mind, it actually starts with people and mindset. Because if the people have the right mindset and want to walk through that door like you described, or the actions to deliver on whatever given challenge you're given on any given day, be it water quality, be it biodiversity, be it climate, if we understand that that's actually important to the sustainability or the ongoing, feeding and clothing of our race, well, it becomes just almost like, well, why wouldn't we do this? But as I say, I sort of have a firm belief in my own head that it sort of starts with people and enabling people to make their own decisions to answer the given questions, I suppose.
Yeah, I love that. I love it, bringing it back to people and community, because if we don't look after our people and our communities, then they're not empowered and able to make the decisions that are for the betterment of our race, our planet, our future.
One of the other things I talk about in the Andrew Morrison story is I have a young brother who was in military, and he gave me a gift one time, and it's on my wall here, is you're not a leader until you've grown a leader who's grown a leader. And so I spend a lot of time mentoring and talking to young emerging leaders, because that's actually what really floats my boat. I'm looking for succession planning, and I'm looking for really capable people to move through the sector. And, seriously, we got some people that are far more capable than us when we entered at the beginning of our journey.
Yeah, I like to think of it as well, where, hand up, hand down. So, if you're reaching a hand up to be pulled upwards, then reach a hand down and pull someone up behind you so that you make sure you keep that succession plan going.
Yeah, correct. And it is so important because, we all make mistakes. We all learn from them, let's pass on those learnings and make it easier for people filling your shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go back in time a wee bit then. Obviously, you come from an agricultural background, you were brought up on farm, but what was your earliest memory of the farm or of agriculture?
Look, I've been blessed. I've got a fantastic role model, my dad, George, and my mother, Marge. They've just been pivotal in creating who I am and having that love of what we do. And my grandfather, I live in a glorious district here. Our family took up land here in 1875. We've got a family across the river from us, the McPhails, who took up their land in 1874. So they always refer to us as the Johnny-come-latelys. And it's just brilliant living in this community, mates for 5 generations with this family. So my earliest recollections are just working on the farm with my dad, doing community haymaking where you're the kid and you got to drive the tedder or the hay rake, stuff like this. And it was just so empowering as a young bloke because a village was helping to raise you, and it was just great. I think that's what sort of sparked my love of it.
Yeah, there's something to be said for rural communities. I come from an urban background, so I haven't grown up in that, but I am really, really blessed and grateful every day to be able to bring my children up in that sort of community where, that really strong community spirit and working together, working hard. It's not easy work, but teaching work ethic young and working with others for common goals.
Yeah, look, I was shearing here on Sunday, and it was just fascinating where 4 shearers come in. One young woman shore 306 sheep on Sunday here, full ewes. But what was neat, at the end of the shearing run, they went around and they shook each other's hands and gave each other a hug at the end of the day, like, we've knocked this one off. And it was really neat to watch how everyone encouraged each other.
Yeah, that's epic, isn't it? So cool to see groups of people celebrating the success of their day. It may not be big things, but celebrating those small everyday wins to keep that motivation going.
Yeah, and just feeds into this. If we help somebody else, we all take them on the journey, and it's all doable.
Yeah, and it makes life a little bit more enjoyable too. We're out there for living. We've got to enjoy the journey and enjoy the ride while we're here.
Yep, no, I completely agree.
So we do like to put people in the hot seat, and I was wondering if you could share with us your funniest story about farming or agriculture.
Yeah, I had to think deeply about this. It's kind of a nerdy story that indicates my nerdy nature because I don't know if you know George Adamson. He used to be the Born Free guy. I'm the Waitaka Valley equivalent of George Adamson. I'm always catching wild cats here because I've got a daughter that just loves cats. So anyway, years ago, we caught one and he obviously had a gastrointestinal problem when we caught him. So he got nicknamed Stinky. And he was a great cat, Stinky, and he was just fantastic. He was still half feral, but it was just so much fun. And anyway, got quite attached to him and he was easy to miss him. So my wife was going to work one day and she come back and she goes, oh, look, I think Stinky be run over on the road. And it was raining this day. So I shot down and did a standing on the road looking at this cat going, I don't think that's Stinky. Then Jeremy, my mate, arrived over. So we spent time looking at this cat. Thought, well, it could be. So we took it home and we thought, oh, look, Lisa really likes this cat. So we thought, we'll have a burial when she gets home. So we got a shoebox and we made a little casket for it. And we thought, oh, look, the head's in pretty good condition. Lisa would like to see that. So we cut a wee square out of the thing so Lisa could see Stinky's head. And then we thought we'd make a wee shroud around it so that it looked nice. And then he was a bit wet, so we actually blow dried him. And Lisa came home and we promptly buried the cat. We're all a bit sad about this, but you know what's going to happen, don't you? Look, 2 days later, Stinky arrives home. So we'd obviously buried some wild cat, gave it a really respectful burying, but it just shows the nerdy, animal-loving nature of Andrew Morrison.
That's a great story, Andrew. And I think I can relate because the kids and I are cat lovers and we have created kind of a stable, sterilized cat population around the sheds and around the farm. And I'll tell you what, there's something pretty cool about those wild cats when you manage to tame them just enough to see them a wee bit, feed them occasionally, maybe pet them. They're pretty cool to have around and they've got wicked personalities.
Yeah, well, we got 3 at the moment. As I said, daughter loves cats and they are all so unique. And when I was in Canada, we actually ended up having a pet box up there that I managed to befriend.
It's amazing how quickly they come round to human attention, especially the little kittens. I mean, my daughter unfortunately lost her beautiful black cat called Tractor last year out on the main road and had always been asking for another one. Kittens don't come all year round, so we had to wait our patience. And then 2 days before Christmas, we now have a new black cat, a female this time, called Jingles, aptly named, but it's cool to have the wildcats around, and she's certainly come around very quickly to my daughter's loving attention.
Yeah, no, well, that's the great thing about living in communities with cats and dogs and animals. And my daughter's got a donkey and stuff like this. I'm harping on too much about how much I love the rural community, but it's pretty special to me.
I don't think we can ever harp on too much about how we love rural communities. I mean, they are at the core of the sector and the most important thing behind everything we do in agriculture, I believe anyway. And I probably say that with a lot of conviction, but coming from the outside into this space, it is definitely very, very evident to me how strong and how important our rural communities are.
Yep. So that's going to segue into the next questions, I suspect. But, let's just capture that right now. The whole reason for Andrew Morrison doing his off-farm stuff is thriving rural communities. Just enable and get the settings right so that these communities can carry on and deliver what they do. 52 billion export, New Zealand's largest manufacturing sector created by rural communities. Seriously, this is what we deliver for New Zealand.
Yeah, and that does segue really nicely. And I think you've given us there a really, really strong convicted version of the why you do what you do and why you've gone into your role with Beef+Lamb New Zealand. But I guess, could you share a little bit more about how that journey progressed and how you came about being chairman?
I was blessed, to sound stupid, I was blessed to get cancer back in 2002, I think it was. Got testicular cancer, and that was a great journey because what it taught me then, Bex, is life's not all about Andrew Morrison. Because Andrew Morrison may not have even been here, but I had to think about my family and I had to think about my community. So it was a great lesson that it's not all about me. And so then track on to 2011, I was approached to ask if I'd sit on the board of Ovis Management Limited. And that's industry good, just monitoring sheep measles. So I said, yep, happy to do that. Got approached 2011 for Balance Agri-Nutrients. Once again said I wouldn't, but ended up getting elected, and that's been a massive learning curve for myself because I realised how inadequate I was the first day I got into that boardroom, and had to just really lift my skills level if I was going to be of any value to the sector. Then Leon Black was the Southern South Island Beef+Lamb director. So James Parsons was the chairman at the time, came to visit me and asked if I'd put my name forward for Beef+Lamb New Zealand. I wasn't really a Beef+Lamb groupie at all. I was too busy on my own business and doing other stuff, but said I would. And 2014 started there. James decided to retire in 2018, only after me being 4 years. So the board, we went through a process and asked if I put my name forward for chair, and they selected me there, and I've been chair ever since. Look, everyone said, holy crap, it's a pretty contentious time to be in an industry body organisation. And you go, yeah, but nobody can ever foresee things coming. And the reality is, to go back to that value set while we're doing stuff, it's a very important time to get some of these settings right. So loving the challenges and loving the board and the management working together to work out how we're going to do this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, there's definitely some bits in there I didn't know about your backstory, and really cool to hear the journey of how you got there. And I think it's really nice to hear as well how you don't always foresee when times are going to be challenging and what's ahead of you when you take on these roles. But the fact that you can still enjoy the process, and it's almost sometimes in these times of challenge that we actually truly get to live out our why, rather than just being a passenger on the bus.
Yeah, that young brother I talk about, uses a great analogy. It's only when a ship hits a storm that you see the caliber of your crew. And it's really easy to be all pretty supportive and everything's trucking along nice when you're going through the doldrums or the mild times. It's when you hit the storms that you've really got to step up and work out what you're actually doing there and what do you need to get through the other side of that storm. So I do love that analogy.
Yeah, it is a great one. And that, once again, we're doing really well on the segues today, because that probably segues quite nicely into the next topic I want to discuss, which is around the work I do with the whole story, but also this podcast series is based on the framework of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And this episode in particular is focused on goal number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And I really want to dive into that goal a little bit and discuss how the work that you're doing at Beef+Lamb New Zealand is contributing to progress towards the targets underneath that goal.
Yeah, well, when I read there, the peace and justice, I sort of blocked it into two pieces. Peace and justice, in my mind, was a philosophical, where do you want to end, or what are the systems you want to deliver? And it was the strong institutional targets at the end of that, which I could really link to what we are doing. Or number 16.6 under that is develop effective and accountable, transparent institutions at all levels. At its heart, this is what Beef+Lamb is, the commodity levy construct that came out of the economic reform of the 80s. It's a great construct of transparency, accountability, and delivering for sector. So, that strong institutions, we can talk about this on so many levels. We can talk about the work that Beef+Lamb does, say, in its trade access or market access space and supporting the World Trade Organization, strong institutional delivery. We can talk about the disciplines around the Haywaka stuff, around working with government and working with other organisations and running good process to try and deliver the outcome that's needed. We could talk about Beef+Lamb itself, how we run the 6-year commodity referendum cycles and the director elections annually. I'm a big fan of building robust systems that give people confidence in process, because then if you can build all the systems, then you can plug in the pieces that are needed whenever facing any individual challenge. I suppose that's where my mind went to with this one.
Yeah, and I agree. There were certainly some thoughts I had, and it's really nice to hear those sort of deeper underlying examples. And the other one that I thought was quite interesting, you speak about the process that we go through to deal with these different challenges, and that 16.7, how we ensure responsive, inclusive, participatory and representative decision-making at all levels, also resonated with me with the recent work and the work that will continue to be done by Beef+Lamb in the Hawaka Kanoa discussion with government.
Well, let's be honest, that's been the biggest challenge, with the speed and pace of regulatory change. A bunch of our farmers quite rightly say, look, I haven't had the ability to participate in that decision-making. because stuff is just being bombarded at us. Even the Haywaka process, much as we've got the 11 industry partners and 2 government partners, and Cam spoke to this too in his podcast, in a perfect world, we would have had our farmers more involved on the journey, but it's been such tight time frames and such a big process that is the one area we've let ourselves down badly. And I'll wear that one on the chin as an organisation because, the perfect world, we would have worked far closer with individual farming groups to take them on the journey with us.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you taking that on board. And I think it's also important for, myself, our listeners, anyone involved in the ag sector to recognise what needs to be balanced there with that rate of change and that rate being pushed upon you as an industry body, but also that balance of bringing people along the journey and giving them the space and time required. It's a very fine balance that's not actually easy to maintain.
No, and I did like the way Cam described it because, I'll back the bus up slightly. In our referendum cycle, one of the messages we heard strongly through the cycle was we want you to work closer with other levy organisations like Dairy NZ, Hort New Zealand, DINS or whoever. And so we have actively done that, and that's effectively the genesis of the Haywaka Economic Partnership, that when faced with a major challenge like this, let's try and do it together so that we aren't throwing any of our mates under the bus, any of our sector mates, and that we get the best outcome for all of us. And in doing that, it created its own challenges of what I described previously and having time to engage with the farming community. But hand on heart, on the maturity of the sector, we are all trying to work together has been great. If we get to do this again, which we want to do in the nutrient allocation water quality space, the lessons that Cam talked about of engaging with their farming community, we're just going to have more time to do that.
And that's a really nice way of summarising it. And I think a really nice dive into those targets there. I mean, you touched on some other examples when you're speaking to 16.6. Did you have anything else you wanted to elaborate on with the work that Beef+Lamb New Zealand's doing?
Well, as I say, we are a trading nation, and that's what we do. 98% of our mutton is 95% of our sheep meat or lamb, 90% of our beef, whatever percent of our dairy. So the rules-based global trading system of WTO is crucial. And look, let's be honest, we've just done a free trade agreement with the UK, really happy with the outcome there. Just been going through one with the EU and less than happy with the outcome. It's really easy as global nations to talk the talk, but then to deliver on trade access linked to sustainability or linked to these goals was pretty frustrating in that process for us. So, the WTO and the trade-based systems are really, really important ongoing for the success of New Zealand agriculture. And I just need to sort of stress that for our farming community because, there's a bit of a fixation on internal advocacy at the moment in New Zealand space around government speed-based change, around climate change, biodiversity or water quality. But government has done some good work in the space of free trade agreements and market access. And we are highly supportive of that, a lot of time delivering on that for New Zealand farmers.
Yeah, and I think that is really important to highlight, not only possibly some of the shortfalls we might have recognised, but also that good work that's being done in that space, because it is really important to us as an export nation.
Right now, we only have access for 454 tonnes of high-quality beef into the UK market. When we get this trade deal ratified, we got 12,000 tonnes on day one, climbing to free access after the fixed 15 years, no tariffs. I mean, that's massively significant and enables a bunch of our processors to make some different decisions around where they put their product. So it's a pretty cool story.
It's really cool and it's a great opportunity. So it's really nice to be able to highlight that. One thing of interest when you're having discussions around sustainability, are you finding people are referring to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a benchmark for those discussions? Are they coming up in reporting at a global level?
Not so much. What I've been surprised at, every jurisdiction you travel into, be it Wales, be it Ireland, be it the UK, be it EU Brussels, everyone has a slightly different focus, which has surprised me. UK is very biodiversity centric and a lot of their goals and the way they pitch their sustainability. Water quality is really important. EU is very climate change centered in the way they think. They less so link their conversations to the sustainability goals, but as I say, just have different priorities in different jurisdictions. As I say, it has surprised me.
Yeah, that is surprising. And I guess what's interesting about that for me is that I think that it's a good framework to use, because I think because people are using different areas that they highlight, at least if you were using a framework such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, then at least you could make sure that you were covering off all your bases, and you could then pick whichever area of alignment a certain country had to then dive into deeper. So just a curious question from me, really.
Yeah, so look, last time we were up in the UK earlier in the season, we convened a roundtable with all of the sister levy organisations, the HCC Wales, the Quality Meat Scotland, the Northern Irish LMSs, and the AHDBs, the UK. And then we got all the farmers' unions, the different NFUs from the different organisations, and we talked through what we're doing in the enviro space in New Zealand. Basically, the conversation is we don't want to race each other to the bottom by putting silly goals or targets in place. Let's work together on these environmental issues. I'll use the example of which metric we use for methane. Why don't we globally settle on the right metric for the ruminants and not try and out-compete each other? So, look, that was really valuable. So by having that conversation, that's where the focuses came up on the biodiversity, the waters, or the climate change. And it was all slightly different for each group.
Yeah, good to see people getting together and really collaborating on that and trying to get some form of alignment and efficiency in the system.
Yeah, and look, everyone is open to those discussions. Later in the season, I was busy here, so George Tatham shot off to International Beef Alliance and Denver Global Sheep Producers in Toronto. Had exactly the same, mirrored the conversations around the environmental reprovisioning of our ruminant food production. Yeah, let's get the settings right in that sustainability debate.
Yeah, I agree. So looking at those United Nations Sustainable Development Goals then, which one of those do you align with most personally, Andrew, and why?
I'm a nerd. One of the things that I was fascinated with, this might sound a bit stupid, but 50% of our people are male and 50% of our people are female. So I've got one son, one daughter, and it's always, I look back on history and you think, why would people always have this belief the son could take the farm over and the daughter couldn't? So I've always been big on gender equality. By the same token, we're having a great diversity conversation at one of the boards I was in recently. And what is highlighted to me is gender diversity is one aspect of diversity in a boardroom. Ethnicity is a really important thing for me also, but one of the things that has brought to the fore lately is the neurodiversity, especially in rural communities, because we've got a bunch of absolutely great farmers who think slightly differently. We've got a whole bunch of technically brilliant farmers, but we have to enable them. And that's where the farm planning process is quite scary if we have to then start putting things on pieces of paper, if we have levels of dyslexia and different ways of learning. So that neurodiversity is something I think that we have to spend a bit of time putting a bit of focus on.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point to raise. And there's a few things there I want to highlight. You keep coming back to the fact that you're a self-professed nerd, and I can definitely relate to that. I think as a young person in my family, I was the nerd of the family and always mocked for it in a loving manner and kind of shied away from leaning into that. But now I am loud and proud, put my nerd hat on. The other one there is around that gender equality. I've got 3 daughters on our farm, and I hope that one day one of them may be interested in farming, and I certainly do not. I resist any of the viewpoints that it must be a sort of a son that takes on a farm, because I certainly know, seeing already in my young girls, a lot of strength and capability to be able to do anything that their male counterparts can. So that's a really important one to me. But really interesting you bring up neurodiversity there, because I think we're seeing more and more that actually there's less diversity across genders sometimes than there is across the way that we think and how we think. And you may get someone who identifies as female actually thinking a lot like someone who identifies as male, and vice versa. But what we really need to be considering is, as you say, that neurodiversity, the different patterns of thinking, the different ways in which we think, and the different strengths and behind that.
Yeah, well, that's actually what brings a diversity of thought process to a board or a business or whatever. And I love going to a board meeting and having a view, and then somebody else puts a counter view, and you go, "Whoa, gosh, I haven't thought about that. That's really relevant." I like that ability to be challenged. I quite often say the most dangerous person that I ever run across is somebody that knows the answer, because we all have to have our minds open to explore whatever different solutions might be potentially coming forward. If we lock and load one solution, that may not be that best solution in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that is so important to just keep that open mindset and that curiosity, and make sure you surround yourself with people who question you and keep you honest and humble.
Yeah, correct. Don't know all the answers, but working with a collective team is usually the best way to find the answer.
Yeah, and it's definitely boring to be surrounded by people who are just like you. I find it's much more interesting to surround yourself with a wide range of personality types and interests and, yeah, break the algorithm.
It was interesting listening to Julia the other day, Julia Jones, because she said something about her team where, it's quite cool when you all have different ways of looking at things. And it's great to be challenged, because the trap we can fall into is we think, oh, yeah, this is the way to do it. And I enjoyed listening to Julia's view on that the other day.
Yeah, she's great, isn't she? She's always got a really good insight into all aspects of life. And I think I really enjoy her perspective on things. She was a wonderful guest to have on.
Yeah. And once again, she's prepared to push the conversation a wee bit in some places, and that gets a bit uncomfortable. And we should have the maturity and the comfort to push the conversations and not be attacked or maligned in those spaces, because if it's groupthink and I'm going to bully you or malign you if you think anything differently, well, that's not really a healthy place to be, is it?
No, it's not. And I think we just have to remember it's challenging the topic, not the person. So we don't attack people, but we should feel really comfortable to attack topics.
Yeah, completely. I think we are a great sector. It does go even to Julia's conversation the other day around fear or dramatizing conversations, catastrophizing conversations. We are a great sector. I'm just a wee bit worried if we're handling or conducting ourselves like a great sector at the moment in our debates.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I would like to challenge everyone listening in the sector to reflect on that and think whether you are displaying true leadership or scaremongering or instilling fear in people. And as Julia said, if you are doing those things, then you are not displaying leadership, and that we really want to see people having constructive conversations and open conversations. And that's how we're really going to see progress and actually demonstrate our leadership as a sector.
I'd like to think we are all up for any conversation. And I know as an individual, the most liberating word that I've ever learned is, I'm sorry, or I got that wrong, because that actually liberates you to make change. So let's create that environment where we can have those debates and give the freedom to say, yep, we need to change this. But if we get into a situation of anger, grumpiness, and personalization and dramatization and catastrophizing the situation, I just don't think it's that healthy.
No, and it's quite a big expenditure of our energy and time as well. And let's face it, they are two of our most precious resources as people. Is actually the energy you have in a day and the time that you have to actually do the jobs and have the fun and all the other things. So, we don't want to be giving away our time and energy on things that aren't constructive. So put your time and energy in the right places. Not saying to shy away from the conversations, have them, but have them in a space that's going to be constructive and actually going to be contributing to the change and not just whinging about it.
Well, every good debate, you should have the ability to shake the person's hand after it and say, yep, we may have different views or whatever, but let's continue this conversation.
Yeah, 100%. So that leads quite nicely into the next question then, which is, what do you see as the biggest challenge to New Zealand's agricultural sector regarding sustainability? And how would you flip the script on that and turn it into an opportunity?
Yeah, and this is the nub of the question. And this is Andrew Morrison's personal view. So I think it's mindset. I honestly think it's mindset. And look, I know Julia did speak to this too, but we as a sector, there is no sector that's demonstrated the productivity gains, bar none, in New Zealand since the economic reform of the 80s in our sector. Nobody can match our productivity gains and how well we have reprovisioned. So that would demonstrate to me that we're a sector that actually embraces challenges, works out what to do, and cracks on it, does it. And I know that was a big economic reset of the 80s. We're 40 years on from that now. But the challenge now, we are having an environmental reset at the moment, and there's a bunch of these fears of change are starting to emerge again, as opposed to liberating yourself, saying, okay, I'm hearing the consumer in New Zealand society has got some concerns. What are we going to do about that? And how are we going to give them the confidence as we are listening and we're addressing them? So that's first, is the confidence to listening to the challenges. And the second part is, well, what are we going to do about it? If it's real, look, water quality issues in tents and provinces in New Zealand is a real issue and has to be addressed. Climate change, there's bookends of, I don't think this is anything at all, to the other bookend of the world's going to end tomorrow. There's enough science that we should be taking this quite seriously. And we should work out what our role in that is. So let's listen to the science and let's work out what we can do around that. The biggest challenge is mindset. My solution for climate change actually links with my solution for riparian management. Also links in with my shade and shelter for animals, and it also links in with my Indigenous biodiversity, and it also links in with my people strategy of creating great places to work. So if we can sort of link those solutions together in a mindset, I don't find this journey as scary as it should be.
So what do you think then, Andrew, is going to be the pivotal component to shifting mindsets in this space?
Well, I think what our farming community wants to hear, and would love to hear government saying, look, actually, I acknowledge all the stuff that you guys have done. You guys are doing a great job. You are the best farmers, but that doesn't give you a license to carry on not addressing the issues. But I think, what the farming community is hearing is, are you guys all eco-villains or you're eco-terrorists? And I'm going to have to tell you what to do. Now, I don't think that's exactly what government's saying, but I think we are cross-messaging what we're trying to achieve here. So let's pretend we could all just spend some time getting together as government and farming community and acknowledging the great stuff and acknowledging we are well on the journey and acknowledging a bunch of the settings and getting them right, like recognition of sequestration, 2.8 million hectares of Indigenous biodiversity on their farms. Let's acknowledge what the farming community's done and doing. And I think that would get us halfway on the journey of, oh yeah, thanks for at least acknowledging that. And let's crack on and do the next bit, because now I know we can collectively work together and get the settings right. Now, that's what we're trying to do with the farming leaders and the constructs of Hey Waki Kanoa and the work in the water quality space, is acknowledge what's going on farm and get the policy settings right that acknowledge that and actually enable the change.
Yeah, I love that. Just a little bit of acknowledgement, and I'll keep bringing back to, in all my conversations, we can't innovate and face the wicked problems that are thrown at us from the world from a space of defensiveness, from a space of disgruntlement, from a space of anger. You actually have to face these things from a space of optimism and from a space of positivity, because you cannot innovate in a dark space. So we need to create the light and the hope and the energy so that we can actually move forward.
And you've got to create that own light and energy sometimes yourselves by your actions and your thought processes, as opposed to just getting yourself into a hole and following the wrong conversations. That's what I personally do. Now, I'm not advising anyone how they do it themselves, but I just cannot be sucked into negative vortexes, because it just does your head in. It just sucks your energy out of what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's so disempowering to go into that space, in a way, playing the victim mentality and expecting someone else to save you, because we all have our own internal capacity to save ourselves and create that positive space. Why would you give someone else that power over you and your mindset and your business to have to rely on someone to come and save you, when you could take those first steps, one small step at a time, to actually build the positivity, the energy, and the momentum you need to drive forward?
Historically, our story construct, we've taught our kids four main characters: a victim, a villain, a hero, and traditionally a sidekick. So if you did, Star Wars, you've got Luke Skywalker's the hero, Princess Leia, you've got Darth Vader, and you've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or if you go forward to Shrek, you've got Donkey and Shrek and Princess Fiona and Lord Farquaad. So I spoke about this at a farming conference recently. What do we want to be in this story? Do we want to be the villains, which is what some people in society think we are, in a way would impact water quality or climate? or do we actually want to be the heroes in the story? The most debilitating place to play is be that villain or feel like you're that villain. The place that gives you the most power is to be the hero in the story. So let's be the hero in the story. Let's acknowledge what we do on farm. Let's validate it. Let's tell people what we're doing. And if we need to do more, let's do it. But let's be the hero. Let's not be the villain and let's not be the victim.
I love that. I hope everyone listening takes that on board. Be the hero in the story.
Yep.
So what's on the cards then for the next 12 months for Andrew Morrison?
Well, Andrew Morrison's up for election at the moment. So, currently chair of Beef+Lamb New Zealand. I like the disciplines of the commodity levy construct. We take the referendum out every 6 years to support whether we still support beef and lamb. And we had that 2021, and that was a strong, a resoundingly strong yes. Then we have the director election. So I'm up for election in the Southland ward here. And let's be honest, farmers at the moment, we're struggling with change. We are as a community. And so it's a contested position. I would like to think I'll get back, but let's just see how it goes. I am retiring from Balance Agri-Nutrients this year after 12 years. So looking forward to enabling the next person to come in there. One of the things, I also sit on the board of RONS, where we're doing the deconstructive technology around strong wool. Really excited around that space. So we're going to put a big focus on that this year. We got some products that we are getting right to that commercialization stage. RONS will never be the commercializer of that. We are a science entity facilitating and funding science. Our job is to get that to a stage we can find the commercial partners to deliver value back to the New Zealand strong wool sector. I don't know if you've seen any of that, Bex, but that's fantastic. Deconstructed powders, pastes and pigments. We did our first batch of lipstick that was released with Karen Morrell at the field days. That's just a small indication of one of the products that this deconstructed strong wool could be used in. And the other big thing I'd like to do this year is, seriously, we've got to get this hay walker locked and loaded, irrespective of whether I'm there or not. I'll be just supporting the team fully to actually lock and load this, because this is going to be pivotal in enabling New Zealand sheep beef farmers in that climate change space.
Just a quiet 12 months then.
Yeah. But come on, seriously, what a great sector. And when we get to work on some of these challenges and we've got great people coming through, and if we can do that stuff, imagine if we wake up and we've done some of that stuff. Isn't that the thing to look forward to?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I have seen the work that RONS is doing and really excited about that space. It's just incredible. And the inner geek in me just absolutely fizzes about that. It's very, very mind-blowing, the work that's being done and the opportunities that are sitting right on the cusp there. So I'm really excited to see development in that space too.
Your RONS is a great example of nobody will save your life unless you actively do something. We voted down the wool levy, and effectively there's been a limited investment in finding solutions. So RONS is the last of the wool board money we put into a fund, not unlike a community trust fund, invest in the Balanced Growth Fund, and using the interest and the NB partnership to fund this deconstructive research. And it's been great. And we just have to deliver on it. That's the goal. We've just got to deliver on it.
Yeah, and I'm sure with that momentum and energy and excitement behind you, you certainly will. We do like to leave our listeners back down at the grassroots level, because that's what we're all about, is practical action on farms. So I'd love to hear from you, Andrew. What's one practical take-home action that farming businesses can take to contribute to sustainability?
What I do myself is, this sounds really stupid, I go pound a post or plant a tree on my really frustrating days. And so I actively do something on the farm. I know the day then when hay walker proposal came out from government in October, I was pounding posts at the time when they run through to tell me what it was going to look like, and so I suppose what I try and do is I action change, is I try to live the challenges we're going through. And then what I found is if I can do it in bite-sized pieces, it doesn't become quite as scary. I don't have to start from ground zero. I start from, I've already done that gully. I've already done that piece. Through COVID, I locked my son down on the farm, and we had a young Canadian here. So we just spent COVID fencing those gullies off and planting trees. So the other thing that I do as a tip is, I've got one of my neighbour kids here at the moment, 12-year-old young fella. He brings me so much joy when you're spending time with the next generation. And he's out here weighing lambs this afternoon. He was rounding them all up this morning by himself on a motorbike. That's the other thing I actively do is spend time with kids and young couples in the community to actually enable their thought process and just get them started and say, hey, what opportunities here, fellas? Let's not get down on the mouth about this stuff.
Yeah, I really like that. There's so many things to take away there. When things get a bit tough in the old headspace, going out and doing something physical, something practical, something tangible that connects you back with the land. I think that's so grounding and frees the mind a wee bit. But also, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time. So you don't have to go out and do all of the planting, all of the fencing, all of the sustainability initiatives in one go, but you just take the next right step. And you may not actually have a complete end vision or goal in mind, but actually taking the next right step along the journey, you'll then be able to build the picture as you go. And I think that they're really important things to take away.
Yeah, the other thing is always go back and just reconnect with why you started doing what you were doing. Like I shore my own rams last week, my low methane rams, being a nerd, got them, but shore them myself. Crutched all the ewes on this farm, Lisa and I, crutched all the lambs, and go back and do the stuff you enjoy doing. Why did we start farming? Because we like animals, we like dogs, we like sheep farming, we like beef cattle. Just go back and do it and enjoy why you started it. And that's what I personally like doing.
Yeah, and it fills you with so much energy and passion for then being able to tackle the harder stuff that you have to, because you're reconnected with your why and your values, and that's what it all comes down to, right?
Yeah, well, Julie was great today. Her goal was to bring joy back to life. And I find joy in what I'm doing, like on the farm. I love the community. Had a bunch of mates around last night. I love just physically doing the work, planting the trees, shearing the sheep, whatever. So yeah, just let's go back to why we started doing it and enjoy it.
That sounds perfect. And what a wonderful place to end our episode today. So I'd like to take the time now, Andrew, to thank you so much. And today you're busy farming. And so I know you've got some jobs on this afternoon to get back to. So thank you so much for your time, your energy, your wisdom, and your thoughts on the topic. And yeah, I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Bex. And look, this is a great initiative you're doing. As I say, listen to a bunch of the podcast. And I'm finding this headspace and the ability to listen to different people's views is really valuable. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Whole Story podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it and are feeling inspired and optimistic about putting sustainability into practice on farm. I have one last request for you before you go. Make sure, whatever platform you're listening to us on, that you hit follow and share the show or episodes with your friends, so that together we can grow our community and inspire sustainability in agriculture in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And thanks again to FMG for partnering with The Whole Story, so that we could bring this podcast to life for you all to enjoy. Catch you next time.